our hashtag Last Hurrah. My name is Sukhmani. I'm the festival founder and director. So first off, just want to start with a thank you to each and every single one of you, including our panels and wonderful, wonderful moderator for taking the time to join us this Saturday. And it is a Saturday, it's a weekend, so extra appreciate you taking your morning and joining us here as we celebrate YA and Canadian literature when go out with a bang. Don't forget, you can pick up copies of everyone's wonderful, wonderful pieces of work in the links that we just shared in the chat, as well as, looking at your local bookshops like Iron Dog Books, Massey Books, your local library especially. They're almost always willing to order in whatever you ask for, so even better. And just in time for your winter haul, if we are correct. And also on behalf of the entire festival, we did want to take a minute to let you all know we are presenting this festival today from the unceded. And if you don't know what that means, it means stolen lands and territories of the Tawasin, Kwantlen, Stolo, Katsi, Coquitlam, Coast Salish, Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. They've been the stewards of these lands and territories since time immemorial. We offer them our deepest thank yous and respects for allowing us to gather here today. We also offer our deepest respects for our elders who have passed and those who are with us today as well. Reconciliation, though, as we always say, doesn't just start with what we just said. It's something that we need to put into action each and every single day. It also means implementing things like the calls to action from our Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as well as the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Two-Spirit reports in all aspects of our lives, because the responsibility isn't just at a government level, it's also at a personal level, especially as settlers on these stolen lands. We would also like to bring to attention some recent events that you may have seen in the news, as well as just modern day colonization. We'll be sharing quite a few links actually in a couple minutes that should kind of lead you to where you can make your own learnings. And if you have the capacity to, please do share and support a lot of these organizations, because economic reconciliation is number one, especially as we head into holiday season. So without further ado, I will pass the mic to Tanya, and I almost forgot actually. One last thing actually before I go on mute. We have a zero tolerance policy, as you all probably may have seen in Instagram and more, for anyone who invokes and or participates in any kind of hate, interference and more. We are here to have fun, nurture a safe space, and celebrate. So once again, without further ado, Tanya, the mic is over to you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sukhmani, and to all of the Infusion Book Festival folks. This is maybe, I can't remember, the fourth year perhaps of the festival, and a few of us have been here since the beginning as well, and this is going to be the last year of the festival in this form, but I really want to thank the crew behind it, because they have just been a small but mighty crew that started it really with just their passion for books and YA. And this was actually my very first festival ever when my first book came out. So very special to, I think, a lot of us, and deepest thanks to the folks behind it all. And thanks to everybody who's here on this morning. Really welcome you into our conversation today. We're going to get started. There's 4 events today. This is the first one, and it's called Rewind, because we're just going to look back on this year, have a conversation about what we've been doing in the book world, the writing world, the reading world, and hopefully get some questions from the audience a little bit down the line as well. But I'm going to invite my wonderful panelists here to introduce themselves briefly. We'll just go around. If you want to just share who you are and what you write, and we'll start with you, Tash.
Oh, I'm at the bottom of my screen, so I didn't expect
top of mine. So
I was relaxing into Robin being next. Hi everyone, I'm Tash McAdam. I'm an educator and young adult fiction author. I say my brand is disaster queers because I write across a variety of genres, but always with idiot queers at the center of the narrative, and usually action adventure kind of plots.
Excellent. Thank you so much. How about you, Robin?
Yeah, hi, I'm Robin Stevenson. I live on Vancouver Island, and I write books for kids and teens, so ranging from picture books through young adult, and both fiction and nonfiction.
Thank you. And you, Lynn?
Hi, I'm Lynn Painter. I write
I live in Nebraska, down south from all of you lovely Canadians. And I write young adult rom-coms, Better Than the Movies and The Do-Over. And then I also write some adult rom-coms. So.
Awesome. Love it. And I realized I didn't introduce myself. I'm Tanya Boteju. I write young adult contemporary, and I'm also a teacher here on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, also known as Vancouver. So welcome everyone. I'm going to ease us in with a sort of an open question, looking back on this year, folks. What was one of your favorite aspects of your writing life this year? So it could be a moment in time, it could be a festival or a book that came out, a conversation you had. Yeah, let's talk about favorites looking back. And we'll start with maybe you, Lynn.
I'd have to say my favorite is I got to go to a festival. I mean, so many of us, I think before you have a book come out, your dream is always to like, oh, I'll go on a book tour. I'll be out at these festivals. And then the combination of the reality that it doesn't really happen that much. And also then COVID, it kind of made you be like, oh, I'm never going to go to a festival. Okay, those don't exist outside of your computer. But in October, I was able to go to the Saratoga Springs Book Festival. So it was like, I got to go to upstate New York in the fall when the foliage was lovely. And the greatest thing was I got to actually engage with readers in person. Yes. And then fellow authors that I've known for years that I think of as my closest friends, but I actually haven't met in real life.
Yeah.
It was surreal. Like, it was funny because we were talking about something at dinner and then I was like, how is it possible we've never met in real life? Because immediately these are people you've known for years that have been through everything with you. So it was really, for me, the highlight of my writing year is getting to actually do that, to get out and be with other readers and writers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's so different, really. I mean, it's funny too how close you feel when you've been interacting online for so long, and you're like, yeah, these are my friends, but I've actually never seen you in person, right. Had a conversation in person. It's so bizarre. What about you, Robin? Excuse me.
Yeah, I absolutely echoing all of that. Having in-person events start up again has been really, really wonderful. But yeah, in terms of writing, I think for me, the last few years, I've been writing a lot of nonfiction and really looking forward to getting back to fiction. And right near the beginning of the pandemic, I took part in the 3-day novel contest where you try to write a novel in 72 hours. I sort of locked myself in the garden shed with no Wi-Fi and wrote about 8,000 words a day. So it's more of a novella, really. I ended up with a sort of 25,000 words, but it kind of helped me get out of my early pandemic stuckness in terms of writing. And I sort of would put it aside because I don't think it was a big market for YA novellas and I didn't really know what to do with it. And then this year I decided I would rewrite it as a young adult novel. So basically make it about 3 times as long. And I've just sort of started from scratch. I haven't really used much of the original manuscript, but I've taken those characters and the premise. And I had a wonderful conversation with Tom Ryan, who was the co-author of my last young adult novel. We wrote a book together called When You Get the Chance. And Tom is really great at plot. So I had this fantastic conversation with him, helping me kind of brainstorm ideas and figure out how I might be able to turn this little novella into a full-length YA novel, and including sort of figuring out some of the things that I'd been really stuck with, like the fact that it takes place all like in one house and how to sort of expand it. And anyway, it was a great conversation and left me super excited to get back into writing this book. And now hoping to have a first draft done by the end of this year and just loving being back into fiction again.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. That sounds fun. Good for you for also locking yourself away from the Wi-Fi family.
Desperate times.
Yeah, totally. How about you, Tash?
I think my favorite thing has been working on this soundscape project. So some audio engineers who work on podfix and audioscapes contacted me earlier this year with a really hugely conceptual project about a museum comprised entirely of sound leaks from another universe. And they had me writing the script for the sound leaks. And that was just amazing. It's been really fun to sort of go back and forth with two really creative people in a different industry, like to think about the sounds, like they're making alien noises and things, and the ship talks, and they're doing all this like cool effects and things. And at first I was really intimidated by the scope of the project, and I genuinely sat down when I first started. I was like, I'm not clever enough to write this, like they need someone cleverer than me. And then I figured it out and was like, maybe I'm the clever one, and felt like, you know, galaxy brained it. And it was just such an outside of my usual experiences with writing. And I just got my sample this week of the first time I've ever heard someone record fiction that I wrote. And it's got all these cool alien noises and stuff in it. It's so much fun and such a like outside of my usual experience, and such a weird project to work on, like just little glimpses instead of, usually you're conceptualizing like a whole universe or a whole narrative, right, and following it on this massive arc and really getting into like all of the details. With this is much more like you're skipping over the top of this huge world that does exist, but you can't see any of it or hear any of it. And that has been a real fun project for me. It's on tomorrow at VPL. If you're not doing anything, you can come and see my weird alien soundscape walk.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah,
It's gonna be, I'm really excited. I don't know what to expect. They're doing like I think some light stuff as well as all the sound things, and it's like set up in VPL, like using the space, so you like walk through, and then there's different like triggers for different exhibits. I don't know. I still don't really know what to expect because it's such a weird project. I'm very excited.
So interesting, so original.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of answered the next question, which was really just looking back on this year, I was just curious whether there's anything sort of unusual or bizarre or, you know, that happened in your writing life, or alternatively, if you've already answered that question, for example.
Sorry.
No, it's great. If there was anything that happened even outside of you and your own writing and books that you were really excited about in the writing world or the publishing world that you saw happening, whether it was like a book that came out or an event or something in the news about books and publishing that you were kind of really just excited or curious about? News events. Let's start with you, Robin.
Oh, I was hoping you would start with someone else because I was having trouble coming up with something. You know, I think for myself, a writing thing that happened that I'm excited about was that I sold another picture book, and I also completed my first adult novel, which is a mystery and is now with my agent. So everyone, please cross your fingers for me. Hopefully, it will find a home. But yeah, it's interesting. I feel like, you know, when I started writing, a lot of people sort of were, you know, saying, oh, you know, it's good to sort of have sort of be consistent in terms of the type of writing you're doing, you know, like pick an age group or a genre and, you know, stick with that and so on. And I've really done the opposite of that. I've jumped from picture books to middle grade to YA to adult and back to picture books, and from fiction to nonfiction. And I think for me, that's what keeps writing fun and interesting and exciting. That, you know, I would like to eventually write in every category that I enjoy reading in. So yeah, so I guess just continuing to kind of write what I feel like writing, and hope that just works out in some way. And feeling grateful that so far, you know, publishers and readers have been okay with that.
Yeah, and your first adult novel, that's super exciting. Yeah, good for you.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
I'm trying to write my first adult novel. I'm in the very, very early drafting stages. It's pretty fun though. It's a very different activity. But on exciting things, I pulled Iron Widow off the shelf to yell about it.
Oh.
Chance to read Iron Widow yet? This is my favorite thing that has happened this year. It is like a Pacific Rim alien mecha Chinese history mashup, like a totally alternative alien invasion Chinese alternate history with like a queer polyamorous main character, and it is vicious. Like for YA, it goes really hard and investigates a lot of the things and a lot of the sort of like relationship tropes and stuff that I like to see really deeply mined. And it is a rip-roarer of a read. Like I've got maybe 12 quotes pulled out of this in my quotes book, and usually I'll get like a maximum of 2 from a good book. So like yeah, I'll yell about Iron Widow all day. You should go pick it up if you haven't.
Yeah, it's sitting on my bookshelf waiting to be read. That might be a winter.
Oh, move it to the top of the pile. Move it to the top. I picked it up, didn't put it down.
Yeah,
just went straight
selling
through
it. You're definitely selling it.
Yeah.
So I'm just so excited it exists, you know, like.
Yeah, I've heard lots of really great.
We don't get books like this, and now we do.
I love when you find a book like that you just can't shut up about.
Yeah.
That is the greatest thing in the world, where you're
So
shoving
sad.
it down everybody's throat. All books should be like that.
Yeah.
we try. How about you?
Right? Well, I do have to say, I agree with Robin. It seems like when I write different things, I'm more creatively, like, I don't hit the wall as hard when you get stuck, because you're going in so many different directions that's part of the reason why I love writing more than one. But for me this year, I think was just super fun as a writer, because my debut came out and it was just kind of a quiet release. And it's just totally been beautiful through the power of social media, that it's just like word of mouth. The paperback came out and did 10 times better than the little quiet hardcover that nobody was really even noticing did. And it's just been one of those amazing things.
Yes.
It's a rom-com, you know, it's got fake dating. It's better than the movies. And you can't ask an author what their book is about. You ask me that and I can't tell you. If you can hold it up for us. Do you have it there? Of course I have it here. You know, they give you so many copies, right? And you don't even
closer. It's like you've never held a book up to a screen. Come on, we need to see it. Yeah. Yeah, that looks fun.
There you go.
All
You
right.
gotta like waft it across like that. Lynn. You got to give us time to see that.
There you go. You got it, right? But it's just been a fun year, because I feel like I had a year of great engagement, like getting to know readers and having relationships where you feel like you just essentially have this world of friends. Like, I'm pretty introverted in real life, and it's just all of a sudden I feel like I have this community. I don't know what happened. I have people, and it's just been so refreshing that I'm just could not be happier with life right now. So
That.
Love it. I love this energy too. It's so
Yeah, I have some of that.
yeah, well, you've got it. I feel like you've got it too.
yeah, for sure.
I also just want to remind anybody in the audience, we'd love to have your questions as well. So you can pop them in the Q&A. If the chat's enabled for you, please feel free to pop them in there if you're comfortable as well. We'll definitely have time for your questions. If you want to know anything about these authors and their past year, past little while. So we kind of started personal, but I wanted to zoom out a little bit and think a little bit about the world at the moment. Lots going on, good and bad, and you know, heavy and light. And I'm wondering whether anything about this past year and what's been happening around us. I mean, before it was sort of, you know, the pandemic's not over, unfortunately, but there's also, you know, uprisings and you know, people in the world who are celebrating and then also suffering. And I'm wondering just whether any of that sort of outside world makes it into your writing or writing practice, or whether it inspires you, or maybe the opposite when you're writing. So how much of what's happening in the world around you this past year has impacted how you write or what you write, if at all?
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah, for sure.
So I've never written a book as sad as the book that I have been working on over the pandemic. And it's not just the pandemic, it is also the huge swathes of anti-trans rhetoric and law that's coming out. And so I'm writing a book about a character with anxiety and depression, and then obviously navigating those things within the world that we're currently in. It was way heavier than I expected it to be. And it's not a heavy book per se, it's a murder book. It was going to be a rom-com, but apparently I don't have that skill set. So I had to just like murder somebody real fast so that there was something to solve. But I genuinely, I've never written anything and like felt as connected to like the sad, hollow parts of being a minority, I guess. It's been really weird. It's been a weird time.
Yeah.
Screw you, J.K. Rowling.
Yeah. You indeed. Yeah, there's a lot around that too. And right
like,
now.
and being a British person and like talking to my friends back there, like who are on the ground experiencing the pushback and how much the public mindset changes every time there's a new piece of hate speech released as a think piece or an opinion piece. It's not nice.
No.
Sorry, it was a really sad answer, but
no, and I think, I mean, that's kind of where, I mean, I don't want to, you know, live in the sadness, this whole panel, but I think that that's important. I think it
has a super happy ending. Well, I mean, super happy.
Go.
There is a death, so. But I mean, it's a murder book, so you know there's a death going through. It's not like a surprise death.
Not a surprise.
But it does end on like a positive and hopeful vibe, not just like the whole world is garbage, which is somewhat of the vibe I try to avoid.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, like our chat is saying right now too, it is hard to block that stuff out, and it's important to talk about these things too, right? What about you, Robin?
Thanks, Yana.
Yes, same. I mean, it's been a year of book bans and ever escalating anti-queer and anti-trans rhetoric. You know, I've certainly keep making decisions about getting off social media and then feeling like, no, I actually need to use social media, and, you know, going back and forth on that, and and trying not to let it influence my writing too much, or at least not let it make me self-censor in terms of what I'm writing. But that's definitely been a challenge. You know, it's I think I've had about 8 of my books banned in various places over the last year. And, you know, in the last few weeks had so much really unpleasant messages through my website and through social media, to the point where I actually had a death threat, which I ended up having to report, you know. And it's, so I don't know how you filter that out, and in terms of not having it affect your writing. I feel like on one hand, you know, there is this sort of temptation to self-censor. You know, it's hard to have a book, you know, we'll be working on a book and thinking it's just going to get banned anyway, you know, like it's not going to be, you know, and at the same time feeling like, okay, this just shows why these books are really important and why we need these books and why we need to keep writing these books. And so it's definitely been a bit of a back and forth there. I mean, I think ultimately, yes, of course, I'm going to keep writing these books, and I think this the backlash just shows how important these books are and how needed they are. But it is a challenging climate to be writing in, and certainly there's, you know, many people who've had who are much, I think particularly, you know, librarians and teachers who are dealing with this in a day-to-day way, and are much more kind of on the front lines in some ways than the authors are. And, you know, I have a tremendous amount of respect and appreciation for the teachers and librarians who are continuing to get these books into the hands of young readers, because without them, I mean, there would be no point in writing these books if they weren't actually reaching the people that we're writing them for. And I think taking some you know, encouragement from messages from readers as well. So my little picture book, Pride Puppy, has been one of the ones that's been getting a little bit of backlash, but it's also a book where, you know, I've had messages from parents saying, you know, that their kid pointed at characters and said, you know, this looks like, you know, someone in their family, or, you know, so, you know, I think, yeah, obviously it's really important to keep writing these books and hoping that they reach the people who need them.
I definitely went in the opposite direction. Instead of self-censoring, I was like, oh, you banned Bloodsport, which was like quite a like surface level, not going super deeply into any of the things that I really wanted to investigate because it's a short book. If you banned that, you were going to ban this one so hard. Like, you were going to ban it before it hits the ground.
Yeah. And the messages too that you get that are the opposite of all those
Yeah.
hateful, ignorant messages are the ones that sometimes, I mean, often keep you afloat too, and realize like, actually, no, I gotta keep doing this. Right. Yeah.
Especially if you're writing like YA for young people, I think putting the focus on responses that you get from your actual audience, the young people, the kids who are pointing and saying, that looks like it's my family, or the teenagers who are reading it and reaching out to you, like those are the people that matter. Who cares what some old Christian angry person thinks? You know what I mean? Like, they're not your audience. You don't want them to read your book particularly anyway. Like, obviously it's horrific, but cling on to the messages from the people who you're trying to reach. Like, those are the people who you're connecting to, and they're giving that connection back to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as long as we can get them in their hands. That's
Yes,
the tricky part, right? Yeah. And shout out to the librarians, the booksellers, the teachers, for sure. Yeah. What about you, Lynn?
Well, I mean, I write fluff. I mean, and I was going to say, and I'll admit to that wholeheartedly, that's what I set out to write. So it's like, I kind of shut out the other stuff because I can, and just I try to write what I consider like a comfort read. It's not for everybody. We all have everything. Like, for leisure, I listen to a lot of like psychological thrillers because it's so outside of my world that you can just shut out everything else. And it's just a completely fictional ride. So I try in my head to think about just writing a comfort read where, are people in real life fake dating? No. But is it fun to go along for the ride and maybe forget about everything else for a little while? Sure. So I just try to hunker down and settle into my fluff, to maybe try to offset some of the evil that exists in the world.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I almost only listen to rom-com audiobooks these days. Like, I have my podcasts, which are more heavy, but I have to really balance it out with just like lots of queer rom-coms all the time. YA, adult, doesn't matter, but I love them, and it just feels it saves me some days. So thank you for writing the fluff.
Yeah, need it.
Yeah.
Need that fluff really badly sometimes.
Yeah. And so like when things do get kind of heavy, or you're affected by it, and it might not be just world events, but also just like life, how do you sort of manage to keep writing, or do you? So how do you balance out and keep yourself focused on the work when life gets a little bit much? Any sort of tricks, tips, habits that you've developed and managed to develop over time? Can I start with you, Lynn?
Yeah, that is the constant struggle.
Yeah.
I mean, my only tip I have is I have certain time set aside where I have to get something produced. But a lot of times I'll give myself the write-off if I'm not able to create things. If I'm not in the right headspace where it's not working, I'll try to focus on whatever social media posts I need to do or my newsletter, but I try to set aside time every day that's assigned to the writing to try to keep it all moving. And for me, it always works. I don't know why this makes me sound so antiquated, but for some reason, writing in a journal, like switching just the medium of putting pen to paper, I allow myself a lot more garbage. When you're sitting in front of a cursor, I feel like I get a lot more in my head about what I'm writing, where if I'm really stuck, a lot of times if I just take a pen, I allow myself to write a lot of garbage. But then when I'm putting it in the computer, I sort of self-edit as I do it. So to me, a lot of times when I have trouble for whatever reason getting things produced, I turn to the old notebook.
There's a lot of science about how the connection between your brain and your hand writing it in handwriting is a very different connection than when we type. So,
really?
Yeah. Like there's
there's science and I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Not educated at all. No.
Like your brain that won't light up when you're on a computer typing, that will if you're writing the same thing by hand, which I think is fascinating. I'm not a handwriter at all. On top of that, like my hands barely work. Like holding a pen is not comfortable for me. No one can read my handwriting. I type everything all of the time.
Yeah, and I feel like that, but even just the act of writing, allowing yourself to write down garbage too, can be somewhat, I find it a relief. I find it healing in some ways, you know, or like so different to everything else that we're taught or told is, you know, to be productive and to be perfect and you know, write really well and make sure that you're thinking about the impact of your writing. This is sort of like those moments where you can just like, I'm just going to write and nobody needs to read it. It doesn't matter if your handwriting sucks, even, you know, it's just
it matters if you can't read it later is the issue. Like if you
well, but you might not need it. You might not need it, right?
And I'm a teacher, right? So I spend so much time deciphering people's handwriting. Like I get essays and I'm like able to read this essay that everybody else is like may as well be in code, and then I wrote a thing myself and I'm like, well, there are 2 letters here that I can identify, but there are 9 letters in this word. The world's worst game of crossword.
Yeah, I mean, most of my students are now like there's no handwriting happening, otherwise it's too much.
I keep going in for like grade 12 in-class essays and stuff, and they're handwriting them.
Oh my, wow.
Yeah.
That's not happening. What about you, Robin?
There is a public school, private school difference.
That's fair. That's very true too. Yeah.
Right? Like so many of my kids just don't have computers to bring in.
Yeah. Fair enough. How about you, Robin? What's the habit you've developed? You've been writing for a long time.
Yeah. I actually find the notebook thing helpful as well. If I get stuck, and I always have a notebook and pen with me. I usually have a notebook and at least a couple of pens because I'm paranoid about my pens not working and not like being without a way to write. So definitely that. And also just like setting myself like a daily word count kind of goal. Like I decided I feel like I write better when I write more. And when I have some momentum on a particular project, you know, if I'm taking too much time away from it, then when I actually sit down to write, it takes me a while to sort of get back into it and remember what I was thinking and so on. So, so at the moment I'm trying to sort of get 1,500 words a day. And if I can sort of keep that up, knowing that I will get a first draft of this book done by the end of the year. And some days I get those 1,500 words done by noon, and other days it's like 10 o'clock and I'm like, oh crap, I still have another 800 words to write. But yeah, just trying to sort of keep up some momentum. And I find if I'm doing that, then the story kind of is more sort of alive in my head. So if I'm just out walking the dog or something, you know, I'll have an idea and I'll just voice dictate it on my phone if I don't have a pen and paper with me, but I'll just, you know, I feel like at some sort of subconscious level, my brain's continuing to work on the story in between writing sessions. So when I sit down to write, the energy is there. And I've been kind of juggling fiction and nonfiction projects, and I feel like, you know, I need to sort of find a way to make sure that the fiction, the nonfiction, I find easy to pick up and put down. You know, that's very easy. But the fiction, I feel like I just need to find a way to keep the project alive in my head, even when I don't have a whole lot of time to work on it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've heard different ways of doing that too. You know, how do you keep a project alive in your head aside from actually the writing part? Mm-hmm. I've heard people talk about going for walks and actually having a question in their head at times. Some people actually, I know some folks who like print out quotes from their work in progress and paste them around their workspace. Is there anything that any of you do in addition to those that it's like it's writing, but it's not the act of writing? So it's you creating your story, but it's not actually the writing part. Is that, if that makes sense? Do any of you have these habits?
I waste a lot of time on playlists. Like I'll go on Spotify and I'll be trying to like set a vibe.
Yeah.
And then I'll end up where in my ADD mind, I'm like, I produced something tonight. And then later I'll be like, I spent 3.5 hours like listening to new songs. That has to count for something, right? But sometimes that gets me like, you know, if I'm like, oh, this is kind of her vibe for the book, then it might keep me in there, but it also might just be a way for me to waste time. So
I'm useless. I don't have any system. My brain is either doing it or it's not, and I have no conscious control over it. Either the only thing I'm doing is writing, and then I can't like function in society, and people are talking to me, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I was solving a plot hole. I actually need to write for the next 11 hours straight, or I do nothing. Like there is no real in between. It's not efficient, and I would not recommend it.
We all do different things that work for us differently, right?
I wake up at 2 a.m. because my brain is like, solved a problem, and then I have to get up and write between 2 and 5 whilst my wife is slowly like sleeping cozily, and my cat's like, why are you up? And I'm like, I'm so sorry. And the laptop is so bright in your eyes.
Oh.
Time, but you have to write it down because I can't write with pen and paper. Once I did wake up in the middle of the night and wrote Cassius is screaming on my wall. So that was quite good. At the time, I didn't know who Cassius was, but it turned out that in the 4th book of that series, that was very important.
Wow.
During book 2, my brain was like, here's a character that's going to come up down the road. He was stuck in somebody else's head at that point, and we hadn't met him. So
Right. Magic. This is magic, right? This is
it's telepaths.
Actually, one thing that I found helpful, I was just actually, Tanya was there as well at the Surrey International Writers Conference, and found that, having conversations about writing while kind of keeping my book in the back of my head was helpful as well. And since then, I picked up a couple of books about writing while I was there and have been reading those. And that is helpful as well, because if I'm reading about writing while kind of working on a project, I found several times it sort of sparked something, and it may be even reading something that's not like a new idea, but just reading it at the right time, that would spark something or solve something or give me a path forward on something that I wasn't sure about. So yeah, that's been helpful for me as well over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I find reading, I have to read while I'm working on a project, and often reading what I'm trying to write in that genre, I find super inspiring. So even if I'm a little bit stuck in my own story, if I go and read a book in that genre, a well-written book in that genre, I get really excited, like to go back.
I can't do that.
So I know some people have very different versions of this. I feel
like my voice gets really malleable. So if I read things in a similar genre, then I can accidentally lose the voice of the character that I was writing before that. Usually when I'm like deep in the first draft of something, I can only read fan fiction, like exclusively fan fiction.
Wow. That's really
because I know what's going to happen, and they have all the tags, and it's like characters that you have like familiar with, and it's like there's no overlap. Like there's nothing that I'm like worried about spilling into my own work.
Right. Lynn, do you read a lot of rom-coms, or do you read other stuff when you're writing?
Rom-coms is my go-to when I feel like reading, but I'm sure you guys are familiar with the fact that I can't ever find any time to read. So a lot of times I listen to audiobooks like in the car, but for some reason I'm always listening to not in my genre. So I think I worry about what Tash said about losing my character's voice.
Oh, interesting.
If I start listening to other characters.
Right.
So I don't.
Okay. It's fair.
And then in between, all of a sudden I'll inhale everything. So,
Right.
You get there eventually.
I would love to be able to listen, but I can't listen to things. My audio processing is garbage. If I cannot see somebody like speaking to me in their face, I may as well, like, my brain is just like off with the fairies immediately. So audiobooks are no good for me unless I'm like listening to them with my wife, who then can reacquaint me with what's going on every time I look out the window for 10 minutes and I've completely forgotten to listen.
Sorry, go ahead.
Because I can't listen to stuff, I don't get the podcasts, and I'm like, podcasts would be so good. I like read transcripts of podcasts that I want to listen to, and I try so hard, but my brain just can't click in. It's the problem.
It is harder for people. Yeah, I mean, I can really only listen to rom-coms. I've discovered. I tried doing audiobooks for pretty heavy books, and I can't focus, or I need to read it. Whereas rom-coms are a little bit lighter.
What fascinates me with audiobooks is like when you're reading, when you have like a line or something you want to think about, you just stop for a second and your brain has that space. But if you're listening to an audiobook, you're on somebody else's processing schedule. So sometimes they go straight through something you want to think about, and then my brain is thinking about it. Or they are talking about something that I don't care about for a minute, and then I've stopped listening. Whereas in a book, I'd be like, okay, this is like some elaborate description of a man's abs or whatever, and I just jump over it. I was trying to think of something I wouldn't read. Abs. But in an audiobook, like as soon as I've logged off in my brain, then I can't like come back in. So I think that's the main issue. Like if an audiobook was like directly attached to my brain with future technology, so would pause when my attention drifted, that would be great.
Tash, I don't know if you've tried this, but I listen to audiobooks on like 1.5 or 1.75 speed. And I find that actually helps because it forces me to pay attention.
Right.
Well, my brain is full of gremlins and cannot be forced to pay attention. And point two, even when it's fast, it makes it worse because then you drift off for 5 minutes, but you've missed 10 minutes of more story because it's at 2.0.
I actually had a couple, there's like some questions coming in from the audience, and this kind of relates to a couple of things we touched on already, but one question is, does writing energize or exhaust you? So how do you feel after a bout of writing, Robin?
The writing itself, when it goes well, feels good. I think the part that exhausts me is the procrastination. So you know that if I have a day where I will do everything but, right? Like I'll sit down at the computer and I'll check my email, and then I'll decide to check Twitter or Facebook, and then I'll check my email again. And maybe I remember that I need to send an invoice to somebody, or I need to reply to a message. And 2 hours will go by and I won't have started writing yet. And that I find is does not feel good. When I'm actually able to open the document and start writing and not procrastinate and get into it, it feels really good and I really enjoy it. So I don't know why I put it off, but sometimes I can feel my brain kind of trying to squirm away from actually doing the work. So like it's once I start, I feel like I could just keep writing for hours. But it's just that the procrastination.
Starting is hard. It's
starting is hard.
Pretty human thing, I think.
Yep.
Few writers know about that, I think. Yeah. What about you, Lynn?
Yeah, the writing energizes me. That's my favorite thing in the world. The edits are where I get a little, like I've got edits right now that are due 2 weeks ago. And it's just, it's just like a homework assignment where you're reading it and, there's just like a little note, like, can you inject more emotion here? And I'd like to know what's going on in her head a little more. So then it's just like a homework assignment where you're like, okay. And it's like so hard and such a slow slog. And then when you get like the next round back, you look at what it added, what your editor actually added. And you're like, thank God for editors and thank God for that painful project because it adds so much. But I find that to be what exhausts me.
Or tedious.
Today.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, I love fast drafting. Like when I go into something draft 0, I just put square brackets for anything I can't think of immediately. And so like I get the bones of the story down usually quite fast. My second run through is when my brain is squirming away like a bag of cats, because it's when you actually have to like pay attention and make things nice. But when my edits come back from an editor, I'm like, here is a list of tasks to achieve. I have to inject emotion. It is very finite. I can see how many comments there are. And there is nothing that pleases me more than when I've gone through a document and I've left only the compliments. And so I go back and then I look and I'm like, do I have more work to do? And it's like, this whole page is read, but what it says is, I love this passage. And I'm like, next comment.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny how we're so opposite.
Yeah. I'm like that constant like support of what I'm supposed to be doing, like a list of tasks is when I'm at my most efficient. Like my ADHD can be a true superpower. I'm a speed reader and I go real fast, and so I can read basically at scrolling speed, but not enough to like think about it if I'm editing, but I can just read through and then be like, comment, do that, but I know what's going on in the main story, so I don't have to like get bogged into the text as much as I would if I was editing by myself, where I'm like, like when you're going back through and you're like reading each sentence, does this make sense? Have I explained the relationship here? Have I described the room? Like that just makes me like.
I'm going to try to take inspiration from what you just said today.
If your editor doesn't leave you lots of compliments, I highly recommend asking them to, because there is nothing better than thinking it's a job, but actually it's them telling you that they love you. Like, I don't know if everybody is as praise motivated as me, but like the more compliments I get, the faster I go as a general rule. So like, if you want me to be efficient at something, just tell me that you really like what I'm doing and you think I'm clever. Like, I finished the project you gave me.
I think that makes sense. That feels motivating to me too.
It's literally my only fuel. When I used to write fanfic before I tried to write, I am now technically not just trying, but before I started writing to get published, I used to write fanfic, and because people comment on it all the time, I was knocking out like 3,000 words a day to just like post it immediately and have people be like, "You're amazing and I love you," and like 80 people come and give you compliments and pick out lines, and you're like, "I wrote this really fast, partly on a bus, and you still love it because it's free." And it was the best. I've never had that sensation from writing traditional to be published. And I think it's just that lack of inherent compliment. Like, you're so lonely when you write. Sometimes you find that, like, you're in your book, you know what's going on, but you're the only one who does. Like, you're the only brain in the whole world that is thinking about this specific thing. I find that to be a very lonely experience.
Yeah. Anybody else feel that loneliness, or is it more like this is actually welcome? I love that.
I like it. Yeah, myself. I like it.
I'm energized by quiet and
yeah.
I want to like crowd write. I'm like, at my most efficient, I would be like in a circle with people just yelling out ideas, which is essentially screenwriting, I've just realized. So maybe I should be like trying to get into television, because that's what they do, right? Sit around in a circle, at each other. I'm great at that.
Yeah, I would agree though with what Robin said earlier too, though, when I do actually have conversations with other writers about writing, I almost always walk away with some sort of inspiration or some sort of idea, like new life for my project. It's just that for me, it's like you procrastinate, Robin, getting to the writing part, but I procrastinate like getting to the talking part, because I feel like I'm going to be tired, or like talking to people tires me, but then it always also contributes something too. This is from some aspiring writers, I guess we have in the audience, always exciting. And this question is, what are some common traps for aspiring writers? So what can get in the way of people who want to write and write for an audience, perhaps? Anything?
I think one of the big things, just going back to what Lynn said about spending that time on a playlist, like, there is a totally reasonable amount of time to spend on a playlist or your social media posts or your Pinterest or whatever. But if you find that you are doing that more than writing, which a lot of aspiring, especially like younger, like teenagers that I'm working with who are trying to put their things down, they spend so much time sort of coming up with the like aesthetic and the vibe that they forget that you also need words to go on the page in order. Like, there has to be sentences, otherwise there is no story, unfortunately. And I think that for a lot of people, like saying, okay, today's only writing or today is only not writing can be really helpful when you're like starting to build your habits, rather than trying to do it all at once in one, be like, I have 3 hours and I'm going to do all of my writing related tasks, like update my website, go on my social media, do my Spotify, and write. Either write first or don't try and do it on the same day. Otherwise you're just like, oh, where's your time gone?
Yeah, you're really caught up. That's really good advice. What about you, Robin?
Yeah, I think self-criticism or being a perfectionist, you know, I think a lot of people who want to write are people who love books and love reading. And it's really, really easy to compare your sort of rough draft with the books that you're reading and think, oh, you know, this doesn't even compare. And it's like, just remembering that the books that you love that you're reading, those are not first drafts. You know, those are books that have been rewritten many times and edited and polished, and that author may have written several other books before they even got one published. So, you know, to give yourself a bit of a break, to let yourself tell the story and get the words down, and just to know that the more that you write, the better your writing is going to get. And to try to get out of your own way a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't feel, you know, you may write something and think it's not very good, but you go back and read it later, and actually it's like, yeah, no, there's some stuff I like here that I can work with. And so to try not to be too much of a perfectionist, to try not to be too hard on yourself, and to remember why you want to write, and to know that there's like so many different types of readers out there. and that you know, whatever you're writing is not going to be for everybody, and that's fine. You know, one thing that is actually kind of helpful to do in a weird way is to think of a book that you love and then look it up on Goodreads and read the 1-star reviews.
And the opposite.
Yeah,
look at the 5 stars. Very
right.
inspiring.
It's because everybody is different, and there are so many different types of readers out there, and not everyone is the audience for your story, but there will be people out there for whom that is the story they need to read. So, you know, just to try to get out of your own way and get those words down on paper, and know that you can rewrite it. With my first book, I think I spent so much time polishing the first chapter, like literally like months, rewriting the first pages and polishing the first chapter. And by the time I actually had a finished first draft, which took a while because I kept polishing the first chapter, I realized that it didn't really get going until about chapter 5. And I ended up deleting those first 50 pages, which I had like agonized over for months. So, you know, so don't do that. Just get that first draft down and know that you can go back and write a second draft, which is going to be stronger.
I always say be a shark on your first draft. Just keep going forwards. If you know that you've really messed something up, leave yourself a note, because you might mess it up again, or it might go back to the way it was originally going to be. But if be a shark, just keep swimming forwards. Never ever look back at where you've been. Just keep swimming.
I have to look back a little bit. Like I find I do sort of circle back. I usually get back into it by reading what I did the day before.
Reading is different than editing, though.
Yeah,
I mean.
well, but I can't read without editing. So usually I do a bit of an edit as I do that. And occasionally I will hit a wall in the writing and realize that the reason I'm hitting that wall is because there's something I haven't thought through earlier on, and I do need to go back and rework something. So I do edit as I write, but just generally,
I would just leave myself a note at that point and be like, go back and fix that and keep going forwards.
Right.
But
yeah, well, I mean, what this is also saying is that there's no one right way.
Oh, yeah,
that's right.
we all have different ways of getting around some of these traps and obstacles too, right? And so don't ever let anybody tell you that there's just one way to write a book.
A huge part of becoming a writer, or like being a writer, is just figuring out what works for you and what makes you
absolutely.
What makes you feel good about writing, what makes your brain work the best. Like, some people work really well in the morning. My brain doesn't even really turn on until about 2 in the afternoon, usually, in terms of writing. Like, the creative part of my brain is not spooled up in the morning. So if I sit down at a computer at 9, there's 0 point in me attempting to do that, because my brain is asleep. I'm still an REM, I think. It's the ADHD. My sleep is weird.
Yeah. Well, and what works for you can also change over the course of your
totally.
Yeah. What about you, Lynn? Any sort of traps that you have got caught up in when you were starting to write, or that you know others have?
Well, I feel like when I was starting, I would get caught up in not really knowing what I should be writing. You know, I wrote a lot of stuff, and then I look back now and I'm like, I wasted a lot of time writing stuff that wasn't really my thing, and it took a while to figure out what I started writing, and I was like, this is it. This feels natural. This feels like I'm right. So it's hard finding that. But also, I think Tash and Robin both each said something. Robin said she feels like she gets better the more she writes. And I feel like that's key. And I also feel like setting aside time where you're not on your Pinterest board. If you have time set aside where all you do is write and you stay true to that, you do get better because you have that regular writing time. And I feel like that is key. Like for me, I felt there's no job out there where you're going to get paid a salary to write your novel. It's always going to be your side gig until it doesn't have to be anymore. I mean, unless maybe you're writing a TV or something, but it's always going to be that thing you're doing on the side. So it's like, it can either be a hobby or you can set aside time and take it a little more seriously. And for me, at least, that was when things started to change. Is when I set aside that time every Saturday between 1 and 3. Nobody bugged me. I'm locking myself in a room, and I wrote. And I felt like that's when things started to kind of go. So
yeah. Again, you have to actually get the words down. Like you have to butt in the chair and do writing. You have to do writing. Right.
I always that's the big key, isn't it? If you want to be a writer, then you have to write things. It is like, unfortunately, a fundamental requirement. You can't just be like, I have a great idea for a book and it is in my head forever. If you want to have it exist in the world, you got to put it on paper.
There's a question here. We're coming up on the end of our time together, but I thought this might be a really good way to end. Looking forward. So fast forwarding, I guess, in line with this event. What are your writing and or reading goals for the coming year? Let's start with you, Tash.
Oh, I always talk too much, so I feel like you should come to me last if we're on a limited amount of space. Writing, right now I'm editing my novel that's coming out next November, which is a dual timeline, unreliable narrator, trans-led murder mystery. And right now I have just entirely ruined my whole manuscript. So the rest of this year looks like me trying to re-piece it together before my editor notices that this has happened. Reading goals, as always, are just to like read the things that I find come across my desk, like, or come across online. Like I keep a list of books I want to read throughout the year that I've seen in various places. I also like to browse at my local library and bookshops to make sure that I'm not just seeing like the big things coming out. I don't really have reading goals ever because if I'm not reading, it means that I'm in a deep depression and everybody's very worried about me. So I always am reading at least 3 things. That's not something I have to like set aside time for, because like breathing for me, it is required in order to function. Right. Like I'm more likely to forget to drink water than I am to read during a day.
Not healthy, but also awesome in some ways.
Whatever. Look at me. I've got my soda stream right here, so I see it and then I drink it.
Robin, how about you?
Yeah, I think well, I want to finish this YA novel that I'm working on, my novella that's turning into a novel, which is a queer ghost story.
Nice.
So I'm really enjoying that. I want to finish that. I have just signed a contract to write 3 more nonfiction books in a series that I've been doing. So
is it the kid series?
Kid Legends series, yeah. So I'm doing 3 more of those. So and I enjoy doing those, but they're also work that I can really do in chunks. Like I can sit down and you know, pick it up, put it down. So I want to try to figure out a way to keep the fiction going while I'm doing that at the same time. So whether that's like working on the novel in the morning and the nonfiction in the afternoon, or some way to balance both. And I want to start another adult mystery. I don't know whether this first one I wrote will find a home or not. Hopefully it will, but either way, I really enjoyed writing it and I'd like to write another. So yeah, that's I guess what is
the premise of your mystery?
Oh, I really hate doing that.
The YA was a queer ghost story. Can't you just
let's try and get Lynn's answer in here.
Yeah.
We're just at the end here.
Yeah. Well, I guess my goal, I have a YA and adult coming out next year, but I've got a middle grade out on submission, and that's kind of new for me. And it's obviously not a rom-com, it's middle grade. So I really would love for something to happen with that. So we'll see.
Fingers crossed for everybody here.
All of writing forever is just like fingers crossed that the projects I want to do will find somewhere that they want to
write
do
a book. Fingers crossed that it gets sold. Yeah. We've run out of time, but I really have appreciated this conversation, everybody, and all the questions that came in. I'm sorry if we didn't get to yours, but I want to thank again our amazing hosts, the team behind this festival. So grateful to them, so grateful to the 3 of you for joining us today, and I hope you will check out the other events happening today. There's 3 more to go and they all sound amazing, but sayonara from this wonderful festival for the last time, but I'm sure we'll all see each other at some point as well. Good luck everybody, and best wishes to everyone in the audience as well.
Thank you
so much. Beyond appreciative. What a conversation for those who are still with us. I'm going to quickly take 30 seconds just to, thank you from the festival, Tanya. As always, just such an amazing moderator. And thank you for creating such a beautiful conversation. Thank you, Tash. Thank you, Tash, Robin, and Lynn for contributing with such fun and like really important conversations that needed to take place. So thank you for sharing that. We know it can be hard sometimes. We really appreciate that openness. We did have one quick question if you guys have like 30 seconds to respond. From Kay Fernandez, who is your favorite character that you've created for all 4?
Let's start with you, Lynn.
You know, I would probably have to say Wes Bennett, the love interest in my debut, just because somehow he kind of took on a life of its own, and he started out, he was supposed to be a bad boy, and then he became the annoying boy next door who actually is very sweet and respectful, and I don't know, I just kind of, he was my favorite.
He sounds nice.
That sounds really boring, but he's my
Yeah,
favorite.
very sweet. I like those kinds of things. What about you, Robin?
Yeah, I don't know that I really have one favorite character, but one that comes to mind is Wolf, who's the 12-year-old protagonist in my middle grade novel, The Summer We Saved the Bees. He's just a really lovely, sweet kid. Yeah, and and I think he's a kid that I put a lot of myself into, even though he's a 12-year-old boy. There's a lot of me in that character. And so he feels very real to me, and I still feel bad about, putting him through so much.
We have to, don't we? Yeah. And you, Tash?
Hands down, Leaf, who is a thief in my Super Queros sci-fi series. He's supposed to have like a bit part in the first novel. And then I missed him so much when I wrote the second book that he ends up being a major character in the third and fourth one, like a huge part of the story. He's hysterical. He just like cracks me up every time. Like they get attacked by soldiers and he just like disappears. They're like, "Where did you go?" And he's just like jumped in a bin because he didn't want like soldiers. And just every time he just makes me happy.
So fun, sweet characters, funny, sweet characters are our favorite. Awesome. Thank you. Sumani,
Thank
is there
you all
anything
so
else?
much. That was it for me. We'll see all of you at 11:15 if you're joining. Take
Awesome.
care.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful day ahead, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.